and deal honestly and openly with the American people and with Congress, we can get some things worked out. I've just been talking to Democratic friends today about things that we agree on. We can do that and give the American people a present. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded not to engage in personalities toward the Senate or its members, and under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, is recognized for the balance of the hour as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the time this afternoon. This has been a big day. It's a big day. Freshmen in this body coming up on the end of our very first year. In fact, all of us here with my colleague from Wisconsin, all of us here freshmen finishing up our first year. And it's a big day, and I got to tell you, I feel good about the quality of the work product that's going on today. I feel good about the fact that there are serious issues before this body, and we have said let's slow down and make sure we get it right, because families have their futures on the line. And I'd like to ask my friend from Wisconsin how he's seen this day go.
I appreciate the gentleman from Georgia yielding. I think it's important to note, as we have listened to a debate that went on all day today, that there really is no difference within this House whether we should extend the payroll tax holiday or not. Both Republicans and Democrats alike have come together and said we want to have that tax break for middle-class Americans extended. But if you were listening to the debate, you might be confused by that, because we so often heard on the other side of the aisle that they don't believe that the Republican side wants to extend it. And so I want to take a moment and just talk about what I think is happening here with regard to this debate in the House. I mean, let's not make a mistake. We have introduced legislation that is going to extend the payroll tax holiday for 1 year. And what that means is $1,000 in a tax reduction for middle-class Americans throughout the country. And in my district, central and northern Wisconsin, $1,000 for them as well. Across the aisle, a proposal has been made that started its process in the Senate, where we would do a 2-month extension, a 60-day extension, which means the proposal is they would offer middle-class Americans $170 in tax reduction. So we proposed $1,000 of tax reduction, and the Democrats have proposed $170 in tax reduction. And I think as the American people look at this debate, that say, well, my goodness, I want to go for the $1,000 deduction, not the $170. And so as we dive in a little more, we hear a lot about partisanship and a lot of differences between the two chambers. And a lot of folks are saying, we can't get this done. Let's adjourn for Christmas, and let's come back at the end of January and through February and see if we can resolve this very important issue. And I would say this, I mean, when we get back next year, there will be five, maybe 6 weeks to work on this. But this won't be the only issue on the table. We're dealing with budgets and jobs bills. The docket, the calendar is full of issues that we have to address in this House. But for the next 10 days, we have nothing on the agenda. The calendar is clear. Let's get the House and the Senate to come together and address this one very important issue, to extend the payroll tax holiday, and let's do it for a year. We have disagreements, but for 10 days we can talk about those disagreements and find solutions that don't work for parties, that don't work for chambers, but solutions that work for the American people. And you know what? If the Democrats in the Senate are steadfast in their request that it only be 60 days, hey, I'll go for 60 days. But I just can't imagine that the American people believe that we're going to get a better resolution in 60 days than we can in the next 10 days. And as I look across my district, everyone in my district, they work today, they work tomorrow, they work the next day. They don't take the week off before Christmas. And after Christmas, they work that whole week between Christmas and New Year's. They don't take that off. Why should this House? Why should the Senate? Let's come back and get this work done for the American people. They deserve it. And it has a real impact. People are concerned about how they're going to put food on the table for their kids, how they're going to pay the mortgage. And $1,000 in the year makes a big difference for a lot of people in my district. And to think that the offer is we're going to give you 2 months and $170, that doesn't cut the mustard for them. They want long-term certainty, at least for a year. Give them that break for a year. I have another concern. We proposed the Keystone Pipeline. I know the President has talked about job creation. We've talked about job creation. We've disagreed on how we do it. The President and others will say the government needs to spend money to create jobs and economic growth. We say, well, listen, it comes from the private sector. Here we have a great example with the Keystone Pipeline, where it's private sector money that's going to create 20,000 new jobs, direct new jobs in America if that pipeline goes forward. It's going to be 100,000 indirect jobs, real good-paying jobs for hard-working Americans. And the President is saying he doesn't want to do it. I say, listen, Mr. President, we can't wait. The American people cannot wait. Let's come together and say, you know what, 20,000 people, 100,000 hard-working Americans can get a good-paying job if you'll sign on to this legislation. Not only that, we're going to take our energy from Canada, people who actually like us, instead of countries in the Middle East. Let's get our energy, let's get our oil from our friendly neighbor to the north, instead of those who are not so friendly in other parts of the world. And another key component of this extension is Boiler Mac. This is an EPA regulation that came out that is going to increase the boiler standards that are used in American manufacturing, costing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for our manufacturers to increase their boiler standards. And in my district, just 2 weeks ago, we had one of our energy companies indicate that they're going to lay off 74 people. And they made it very clear. In their press release, they said one of the issues that's causing us to lay off these 74 people is Boiler Mac, the EPA. Let's take that away. Let's make sure that our energy and our manufacturers have the ability to compete, not state to state, but in a new global environment. China, India, Mexico, Vietnam, we have to be able to compete with those countries. And if we implement this Boiler Mac regulation, we're going to shut down American manufacturing. In my district, it's paper. This regulation will cause Wisconsin paper to be crushed because right now they're under immense competition from foreign competitors. But not only that, they're in a very tough industry as people move to computers and iPads, and there's less paper being used. So I believe that these parties, I believe that these chambers have to come together in the next 10 days. And we have to find a solution that's going to work for the American people, that is going to extend this payroll tax holiday, that's going to give them certainty. So as they start the next year, and as they start it with hope and a thought of opportunity, they know what they're going to get in regard to the payroll tax holiday that's going to come from this House. And so I would encourage all of my colleagues to come together during this season where we're all supposed to get along, we're all supposed to think about the meaning of Christmas, reach a hand out across the aisle to our friends who don't always agree with us, but who can come together on this issue and say, America, we're going to stand together as the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate and pass a bill that's going to give you certainty for 1 year, giving you a tax break to the tune of $1,000. And so with that, I would yield back to my good friend. I appreciate him offering me the time during this hour debate.
I thank my friend. And I hope folks were paying close attention. I hope folks are paying close attention. What you have are two members of the freshman class on the floor right now, Mr. Speaker, and what you heard from my freshman colleague was, when can we come together? What you heard from my freshman colleague was, I don't want to do it if it's about party. I don't want to do it if it's about chamber pride. I want to do it because it's the right thing for the American people. Is that what you're reading, Mr. Speaker, in the newspaper about what this freshman class is doing? Is that what you're reading in the newspaper about what this Congress is doing? Because I tell you, having sat here now for 1 year, I can tell you that's what's going on right now. That is what is going on here today. Republicans are in the majority, Mr. Speaker. With the power of your gavel, you could demand that the House bill be the only bill that anybody considers. That it's our way or the highway. Who cares what the Senate has to say? We're in the majority. We're doing it our way. You could do that, Mr. Speaker. But that's not the advice and counsel that my colleague from Wisconsin gives. The advice and counsel that my colleague from Wisconsin gives is, we've done the very best we can in this chamber. Work product that we're proud of. And now it's time, since the Senate has passed a very different work product, candidly a work product that I am not proud of, a very different work product, that we now come together, the House product and the Senate product, and try to agree on a final product that can pass both houses. This is a process as old as this institution. As old as this institution. Thomas Jefferson, when writing the rules for this institution, Mr. Speaker, wrote of the conference committee process and how that is the tool for resolving differences between the bodies. Now, why are there differences today, Mr. Speaker? Well, there are differences today because these are important issues that we're talking about. This isn't some renaming of a post office. I'm not trying to denigrate the importance of a good name on a post office, but I put that lower on the priority list. This is about Medicare beneficiaries being able to find doctors. This is about whether or not unemployment checks continue to go out the door. This is about payroll tax cuts for every single working American family. This is about jobs, not just folks who don't have them, but folks who are looking for them and how we can help them to find them in the future. Boiler Mac, that my friend from Wisconsin mentioned, is a job-growing proposal. The XL pipeline, a job-growing proposal. That's what we had. In the House-passed legislation, Mr. Speaker, you know, we had not just unemployment benefits, not just payroll tax breaks, but also real proposals and reforms to grow this economy once again. Those are absent from the Senate proposal. Now, I'm not attributing any bad motives to our friends in the Senate for producing a proposal that didn't have any job-creating structure to it, but I simply point out that is the proposal they produced, and now we need to come together to talk about it, and candidly, I think we're going to win that one. I think if our friends in the Senate weren't so hurried to get out of town, Mr. Speaker, that they would have produced a more thoughtful piece of legislation that would have included the job-growing provisions that we include. And we now have the opportunity to come together and do that. Let me just talk about why it is the Senate proposal is so concerning to me and my constituents, Mr. Speaker. This is what ABC News said. Holiday passed by Senate, pushed by President, cannot be implemented properly, experts say. Now, I don't think that surprises any of the job creators in this country, Mr. Speaker. If you're one of those folks who has to fill out government paperwork quarter after quarter after quarter, yeah, you're probably thinking, don't change the rules on me 10 days before the start of the new quarter. And if you do, don't change them back in the middle of the next quarter. Cannot be implemented, experts say. But, Mr. Speaker, the question is, why would we even try to produce a short-term solution when we have it within the ability of this chamber and the one next door and down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to produce a long-term solution that serves the hard-working taxpayers in this country? We can do better, and we owe it to the American people to do better. From the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, the confusion that the 2-month extension would impose on employers or their payroll providers will inevitably divert resources away from productive activities. Indeed, the uncertainty regarding what happens next following the 2-month expiration date will serve as additional fuel to currently low business confidence levels. This is what the business community, the employer community, the job creator community is saying about the so-called Senate solution. And in fairness, even the Senate, Mr. Speaker, is not standing by their solution. They're saying, let's just do it for 2 months and then we'll come up with something better. As my colleague from Wisconsin said, the time to come up with something better is now. From the National Roofing Contractors Association, talking about the Senate proposal, this would impose an undue burden on employers in the form of logistical difficulties and costs. I appreciate my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle and their commitment to helping the unemployed through a check from the government. Unemployment insurance is a long-time facet of the American economy, something that folks pay into, at least for those first 26 weeks, that businesses pay into. But in the name of providing checks from the government, what we're saying is you're going to get fewer checks from employers. Logistical difficulties and costs in creating new jobs, which I continue to say, Mr. Speaker, is the focus of this Congress, has been and has made me proud. From the Associated Builders and Contractors, this sort of temporary fix underscores Congress's uneven, ad hoc approach toward the economy. Whew. Who disagrees with that, Mr. Speaker? How many times have you had a constituent back home? How many times have you heard from one of our freshman colleagues who said the reason I ran for Congress is because the guys in Congress are doing more harm than good? I'll say it again. Associated Builders and Contractors of the Senate solution. This sort of temporary fix underscores Congress's uneven, ad hoc approach towards the economy and causes more harm than good for America's job creators. Mr. Speaker, have you heard my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle asking why it was so important for us to go to conference with the Senate to try to improve that Senate proposal? Have you heard speaker after speaker on the Democratic side of the aisle come to the floor and say, why won't you just pass it? Why won't you just do what the Senate in its wisdom has suggested? Well, let me repeat the answer for Mr. Speaker. Referring to the Senate solution, this sort of temporary fix underscores Congress's uneven, ad hoc approach towards the economy and causes more harm than good for America's job creators. I got to tell you, Mr. Speaker, there were times during the debate today I thought my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle were trying to shame me into voting a different direction. Shame on me for believing what I believe. Mr. Speaker, I say shame on me for not standing up for my constituents if I didn't stand up today. Shame on me for not standing up against a proposal that causes more harm than good for American job creators. This isn't a game. This isn't some sort of political academic exercise. This is about families. This is about our economy. This is about the future of our republic. And the decisions we make here have consequences. Rush through it. Rush through it, Mr. Speaker. Put it off for 2 months because we'll come up with something better later when that short-term fix causes more harm than good for America's job creators. Mr. Speaker, it's not just the business community that has these concerns. And it ought to tell you something about the debate that's going on here today. From the President of the United States, Mr. Speaker, it would be inexcusable for Congress not to further extend this middle-class tax cut for the rest of the year. The President knows. The President knows. He's been pushing it all year. The President knows. It was his idea last December. The President knows that a one-year extension provides more certainty, more dependability. And he's asked Congress to do that. Now, what does that tell you, Mr. Speaker? All of this talk down here today about partisan divides and games, what does it tell you when a hardcore conservative from Georgia is holding up a quote from a hardcore Democrat from Chicago about what we ought to do to move this country forward? What does it tell you, Mr. Speaker, when on both ends of the spectrum we're feeling the same thing, that it would be inexcusable for Congress not to further extend this middle-class tax cut? Inexcusable. Folks say, oh, you can't. There's not enough time. Folks, there's 10 days. 10 days. We just finished the National Defense Authorization Act, Mr. Speaker. The biggest defense bill that this Congress will produce. And guess what we did? Same thing Thomas Jefferson suggested. Same thing that's been going on in this Congress for 200 years. We had disagreements with the Senate. We passed a House bill. They passed a Senate bill. We went to conference. And in 7 days, Mr. Speaker, they reconciled the largest defense bill we'll move in this Congress, brought together the two differences, brought something to the House floor and the Senate floor for consideration. And we got it done. Inexcusable not to extend this. From House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, House Democrats will return to Washington to take up this legislation without delay, and we will keep up the fight to extend these provisions for a full year. Now, in fairness to the Minority Leader, she's not talking about pushing the year-long provision that this House passed. What she's talking about is producing the short-term solution and then calling everybody back to then come back and get it right later. But at the end of the day, we all agree that a year is the right length of time, that 60 days is not the right length of time. Everybody agrees it's a bad length of time. They're just doing it instead of 0. They're saying 60 is better than 0. Folks, why do we have to have 0? Why can't we have 360? We can. We don't have to have 60 as the Senate proposed. We can have 360 as the House proposed, and that's why we moved today to go to conference. From House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer, I'm disappointed that Senate Republicans would not agree to a longer-term extension of critical policies. He's talking about this so-called bipartisan agreement from the Senate. I'm disappointed that Senate Republicans would not agree to a longer-term extension of critical policies. Well, I'm gonna team up with the Minority Whip. Again, one end of the spectrum, my end of the spectrum, two opposite ends of the spectrum. I agree with Steny Hoyer. I am disappointed that we did not see a longer-term extension of critical policies come out of the Senate, but it's not too late. Oh, Mr. Speaker, that's what folks have been saying all day. Oh, it's too late. It's too late. It is not too late. These policies do not expire until January 1st, and the only thing standing between us and a conference committee to work out these differences, Mr. Speaker, is the will to make it happen. You know how painful it's been all day, Mr. Speaker, to have folks stand up, speaker after speaker after speaker, talking about how it can't be done? You didn't run for Congress, Mr. Speaker, because it couldn't be done. I didn't run for Congress because it couldn't be done. I ran for Congress because they weren't getting it done, and it's time to get it done the right way. Well, Mr. Speaker, we've been here 1 year. We have 10 days to get it right for the American people. We can, and we should. Now, what are we talking about? You can't see this chart, Mr. Speaker, and it might not even show up on the cameras back in folks' offices, but I want to go through it because it talks about why this is so important, Mr. Speaker. Again, this isn't an academic exercise. This is the country we're talking about. You know, folks have been saying all day long, oh, why don't you just pass the Senate bill? Why don't you just move that 60-day extension? Why don't we just come back and do it later, Mr. Speaker? I hope you hadn't had to put anything on your credit card during this Christmas season, but I got a lot of friends and family that have. Money's tight. If you, here in the Christmas season, opened up your credit card account on the day that Jesus Christ was born, and you put $500 on that credit card, and you put $500 on it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, 7 days a week, Mr. Speaker, from the day that Jesus Christ was born until today, you would have to continue to put $500 a day on that credit card every day, 7 days a week, for another 700 years to put on your credit card the kind of debt that the Senate bill puts on America's children's credit card next year alone. Hear that? Just do it. Just do it. We'll come back later and fix it. Just do it, they say. This isn't something small we're talking about, Mr. Speaker. $30 billion on the credit card of America's children is what this bill did. Now, it raised taxes even more than that. It put the burden on the home mortgage industry. It put it on the construction industry, an industry that we desperately need to reinvigorate in this country. It took it out of Fannie and Freddie, a group that we absolutely need to continue to build, but put that money in the trust fund to make sure that they can pay their bills when it happens. But it's not a small decision, and that's not the only difference, Mr. Speaker. Let me just compare for you. Protecting seniors' access to their doctors. That's talking about this giant Medicare cut that is looming out there on January 1st, and everybody's looking for a solution to it. It's a cut, Mr. Speaker, that was passed in 1997, and neither Democrats nor Republicans have had the good sense to fix it for 15 years. But at least we're trying this year on the House-passed bill to fix it for 2 years. A 2-year fix to provide certainty to America's seniors. House bill, protecting seniors' access to their doctors, 24-month solution. Senate bill, 2 months. 2 months. Don't worry, seniors. That's my mom and my dad. They just went on Medicare. Don't worry. Just let us go home, take some vacation time, come back, listen to the State of the Union, and then, miraculously, all of our problems will be solved and we'll be able to agree on something. Mr. Speaker, we have the ability to agree on something today, and it's important that we do. 2 months in the Senate bill, 24 months in the House bill. It's the right thing to do. Federal unemployment benefits extension. There's a lot of controversy about unemployment benefits. You know, the first 26 weeks are actually paid for through unemployment taxes. The rest of this extension generally is coming out of federal general revenues, general taxpayer dollars. So there's a real oversight responsibility in determining how we deal with that. In the House bill, we say, let's deal with it, let's create more jobs, let's do some reforms to help people to get off unemployment and to find working paychecks that they can receive. 13-month extension. Our friends in the Senate, 2 months, Mr. Speaker. We heard speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker come to the well of the House, the Democratic side of the aisle, wanting to know why Republicans aren't working hard for America's unemployed. And they asked that question, Mr. Speaker, while bringing a 2-month extension. Republicans brought 13. And by Republicans, I mean it was a bipartisan House-passed bill, Mr. Speaker, going through regular order. Number of long-term unemployed allowed to start collecting federal benefits after February. Long-term unemployed. Folks who've been looking, who can't find it. We heard today about how unemployment numbers are dropping. We know that they're dropping because people are just quitting. They're no longer looking. The Obama economy has so discouraged the American workforce, they just quit looking. But there's still some long-term unemployed folks out there. Not some, lots. How many of them get helped under the House bill? 4 million. How many get helped under the Senate bill, Mr. Speaker? 0. Is it worth fighting about, Mr. Speaker? Is it worth standing up and being counted when the solution that this House has proposed under regular order speaks to the needs of 4 million long-term unemployed Americans? And the Senate bill speaks to 0. 0. Payroll tax cut extension. Payroll tax cut extension. This is an extra 2%. Ordinarily, folks are paying about 6% in payroll taxes out of their paycheck. This is cutting that down to about 4%. It's a 2% reduction in the Social Security contributions of every American worker. Every American worker takes home 2% more in their paycheck. House-passed solution, 12-month extension of that 2%. Senate-passed solution, 2 months. 2 months. How many speakers have we heard today, Mr. Speaker, who've talked to us about how families are hurting? Member after member after member after member has come to the floor with stories of someone that they know from their constituency who is hurting in this Obama economy. 2-month extension was the best the Senate could do. 12 months is what we got out of the House. We can do better, and we will do better, Mr. Speaker, in conference. What's that payroll tax cut worth, Mr. Speaker, for a worker earning about $50,000 a year? House-passed bill is worth $1,000. Real money in the pockets of a $50,000 a year worker. What's the Senate passed bill do to help American families? 167. Now hear that. Take us back, Mr. Speaker, to when I told you if you put $500 on the credit card of your child and you started that credit card account on the day Jesus Christ was born and you ran up that credit card $500 a day every day from the day Jesus was born through the day, and you'd have to continue to do it 7 days a week for another 700 years to run up a $30 billion credit card bill? That's what the Senate does to America in the name of a 2-month extension to put $167 in someone's pocket. Is $167 important to the American family? I'm sure it is, Mr. Speaker. Every dollar counts. Every nickel counts in today's economy. But don't tell me that you're empathetic with the plight of middle-class, hard-working Americans and tell me your solution is to find $167 for them that you're borrowing from their children. $1,000, Mr. Speaker, is the first step in the right direction that the House-passed solution contains. It's worth fighting for. Reforming unemployment to focus on reemployment. Mr. Speaker, do you have any constituents that say to you that what they'd rather have is an unemployment check instead of a paycheck? Because I don't. I don't. Folks in the 7th District of Georgia want paychecks. Now, some of them have to accept unemployment checks while they're out there looking to feed their family, but they want a paycheck. So in the spirit of solving the real problems, not just putting a Band-Aid on it, but solving the real problems, the House-passed bill focuses on reemployment. What does the Senate bill do? Nothing. Regulatory reforms to protect American jobs. Mr. Speaker, you heard my colleague from Wisconsin, who said businesses are closing jobs, laying people off because of Boiler Mac, this EPA regulation. You've heard it from our friends from Arkansas, Mr. Speaker, who say that the folks in the pipe manufacturing business there in Arkansas are laying off jobs because of the delay in approving the XL pipeline. This is not about unemployment checks alone. It is about unemployment checks for those who can't find jobs and jobs for those folks who are looking. What happens to the House-passed bill? Regulatory reforms to protect American jobs, yes. What happens in the Senate bill? Nothing. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, are these things worth fighting for? Are these things worth spending a few extra days between now and the end of the year to get right? President Obama says yes. Conservative House freshman from Georgia says yes. From extreme to extreme, Mr. Speaker, folks are saying yes. Mark my words, Mr. Speaker, Harry Reid's going to say yes, too, and bring the Senate back to get the American people's business done. Pay freeze for members of Congress and federal workers. Mr. Speaker, I don't mind telling you that I think I work pretty hard. I try to give folks an honest day's work for an honest day's dollar. But do you think I can go home to a town hall meeting and look somebody in the eye and tell you I'm doing such a good job I deserve a raise? I'm just telling you how the Senate's going to run up your credit card bill by $30 billion on your children. I'm telling you how the House can't find enough votes to persuade the Senate to come to the table. No, Mr. Speaker. Am I doing my best? You better believe it. Am I going to quit trying? No, I'm not. Am I going to accept a pay raise while American families are hurting? No, I am not. In the House-passed bill, pay freeze for members of Congress and federal workers, yes. In the Senate-passed bill, no. No. I'll leave you with that bit of irony, Mr. Speaker. We're here begging our colleagues in the Senate to come back and work. The House freezes salaries for members of Congress. The Senate said we'll sort that out when we come back from vacation in February. And I thank you for the time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does, under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded of a commercial that's been in heavy rotation lately. It's a Christmas commercial. Santa Claus with a backache and a pain remedy being offered to him after he climbs down the chimney. Y'all are probably familiar with that. Santa is, the first shot is Santa kind of trying to work in his headquarters up in the North Pole, putting gifts together, and he's just got a bad backache. Probably got a headache too. And his elves are kind of looking at him concerned as he works dutifully on a job that only he can do. And then they show him as he trudges across a roof about to go down the chimney, and he's holding his back. And then when he gets down the chimney, they show him standing over by the Christmas tree, and he's the homeowner is kind of watching from a different room, and he sees Santa struggling with this backache. And so he then goes to get some pain medicine, and while Santa is presumably unpacking the gifts and putting them under the tree and everything, then he turns around and there is a glass of water and the pain medicine right there for Santa. And then all of a sudden the music becomes lively and Santa perks up and goes on about his business. That kind of reminds me of the headache that citizens, the middle class, have had over the last year. Headache and a backache, but there's nobody there to offer them any pain medication. Instead, they look at them, this Tea Party-controlled House Republican Party looks at them and just laughs, and then they leave after getting as much as they can out of those middle-class citizens. They leave. They don't even offer a drink or a pain medication. They just leave. That's what we've done today. Not in the spirit of Christmas, not in the spirit of Hanukkah, not in the spirit of mankind, but in the spirit of the Koch brothers. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Koch brothers, who you've heard me talk about before. The Koch brothers are a secretive brother-brother combination, two brothers. They inherited their fortune from their daddy. They earned it the hard way. And they have turned their daddy's business once he passed on. They've continued this business and built it into something like $100 billion a year company. It's either $100 or $200 billion a year in revenues for their company. And they are billionaires. Both of the brothers are multi-billionaires, multi-billionaires. They got a lot of money. A lot of their business is involved with energy-related concerns. In fact, they own refineries, oil refineries. They own terminals where the oil is brought to for processing. On those trucks and the pipelines, and they're all involved in the energy business. And they stand to get quite a bit of a return on their investment in the 2010 elections, wherein through their front organization, Americans for Prosperity, they financed what is called the Tea Party, which is supposed to be a grassroots group, but actually it's a corporate-driven animal, and the financing for that animal comes from the Koch brothers and their Americans for Prosperity organization. They spent about $45 million in the 2010 election just running negative ads against Democrats. And they spent that money without having to account for who their contributors were. So we don't know whether or not, we don't know who the contributors are to those secret organizations that were unleashed to taint people's opinions about their representatives and candidates for office. And as a result of this Tea Party ruse that was perpetrated on the people, the Koch brothers ended up in control of Congress, using the Tea Party as a front or as a costume, if you will, taking many justifiably angry American citizens down a deceptive path. Americans who are not happy with the shift in the income disparity in this country. They call them the Tea Partiers, the Tea Party movement. Those people, they look at government and they say that it's government that is too big. What they really mean is that government is not working for me. And then we have the 99% crowd, the Occupy Wall Street faction. That group has arisen based on income inequality, and they blame the corporations, the millionaires and the billionaires, for income inequality. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, both sides have something that is legitimate about their concerns. But it all boils down to money. And the money comes from the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers, through their Americans for Prosperity, they're the ones who bought thousands of people from the heartland on buses to Washington, D.C. during the health care debate to demonstrate against something that was in their own interest, their ability to access the health care system. To trick the people and then finance them to come here. Put them on first-class buses, brought them down here, and we all knew that that was not spontaneous, that that was pre-planned and orchestrated. As a result of that movement, they were able to take over the House of Representatives, calling themselves Tea Partiers. They took over the House of Representatives. This is all pursuant, if you will, and I'm getting ready to get into some trouble here, but I don't know if any of you all are familiar with Lewis Powell, former Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, who back in 1971, I believe, was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court by President Nixon. He was a business lawyer out of Richmond, Virginia, sat on 11 or 12 different corporate boards. And he was friends with people in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And after he was appointed, but before he was confirmed, he wrote a memo to his good friend, who was the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at that time. And that document, which is known as the Powell Memo or the Powell Manifesto, was addressed to his friend Eugene Snyder, who was the director of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That memo is dated August 23, 1971, just two short months before Powell was nominated. So I misspoke. This memo was written before he was nominated by President Nixon for a seat on the Supreme Court. No prior judicial experience, no prior litigation experience, just a corporate lawyer. Appointed and confirmed by the Supreme Court, and unfortunately this memo did not come out, did not become public knowledge until at some point after his confirmation. It was actually revealed to Jack Anderson, who was a liberal syndicated columnist whose column appeared in, among other publications, the Washington Post. He was a investigative reporter with a brilliant journalistic quality that is lacking in our journalists, our so-called journalists of today. But anyway, this Lewis Powell memo, which he wrote to Eugene Snyder, director of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, was written for the purpose of getting the Chamber of Commerce to understand that the free market system and capitalism were under attack, and that the businesses in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce were aiding and abetting those attacks on capitalism. He went on to talk about blacks out demonstrating, and the more thoughtful blacks, the more well-spoken blacks, speaking against capitalism, the capitalist system. He talked about Ralph Nader suing large corporations based on people getting injured in cars that were not manufactured sufficiently. He talked about Ralph Nader suing the drug companies for adulterated drugs or for drugs that were did not do what they said that they were going to do. These kinds of things. They talked about William Kunstler, famous civil rights lawyer, and Lewis Powell, after expressing himself on how these kinds of things are now happening in society. And by the way, that was right during the Vietnam War period, the civil rights era. And he talked about, where are we going? What do we need to do to save our free market system? Well, he advocated to the chamber members, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce members, that each one of them should have a vice president of corporate affairs, so that that person could have a job that did nothing but protect the corporate interests. And he also recommended that various think tanks be established, like the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute. He said we need to have something different. We need to hear some different voices other than the Brookings Institution and other institutions of fact gathering. And so they did those things. Up came the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, and a bunch of other right-wing, not fair and balanced, but right-wing organizations calling themselves think tanks. Then we have corporate money being put into the university system to produce the kind of thought that would be protective of the status quo. And so they began to demand a voice in the academic arena. It's all propaganda that they started putting out there. And they've been doing this, ladies and gentlemen, since 1971, 40 years. It has produced a result culminating in the 2010 election cycle, where they were able to put their hands firmly around the throat of democracy and strangle it. They're doing that today through the folks who they have elected. Those are the Tea Party Republicans. So now, what have those Tea Party Republicans done this past year since they have been in office? They've been up to quite a bit. They have been up to quite a bit, none of which is good for America. It's been destructive for the people, the regular working people of this country and the poor people. What have we seen that they have done? They opposed a debt ceiling increase by misleading the public into thinking that it was more spending as opposed to authorization for what we have already spent to borrow that money. They played games. As a result of their failure to do what had been done on a regular basis for decades, increasing the debt ceiling, it resulted in a devaluing of this nation's credit rating, making the cost of borrowing go up. Now, I know some of you say, well, we don't need to be borrowing any money, but I'll tell you, I don't know of many people able to go in and purchase a house for cash. You go get a mortgage. I don't know many people who are able to go buy a car for cash. No, you get some financing. This capitalist system that they're trying so hard to protect, and I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism, but I believe in fairness also. I don't believe in laissez-faire capitalism. I believe in capitalism that works for everybody, that's fair. In their endeavor to protect that laissez-faire corporation, laissez-faire economics, you know, they have damaged the ability of this government to provide for the common defense and to promote the general welfare. The general welfare, not the welfare of the millionaires and billionaires, but the general welfare, the 99%. What have these Tea Party Republicans done for the 99%? Well, they made it more difficult for their government to borrow money. Some of you say that's good. I say that when you have money, when you need to borrow money in order to prime the pump of your economy, then you should borrow the money, prime the pump of the economy, build up your economic engine, pay off the debt, and move forward. That's the way that we have always done it. That's the way that America rolls, if you will. We're not in any danger of not being able to pay back our debt. It was a manufactured crisis. So 15 million jobs, ladies and gentlemen, have been lost, largely out of the private sector, based on these cutbacks, these mindless cutbacks. Seniors have been threatened with a change in Medicare into a voucher system as proposed by the Budget Committee chairman. These things have not been good for the working people of this country. The cuts in the Paul Ryan House GOP budget are inhumane and merciless. They have been quite dutiful in doing the business of the Koch brothers. They haven't been doing any business on behalf of the 99 percenters. The Ryan budget, the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, which set arbitrary spending caps and required a balanced budget amendment, which would lock in an unfair tax code and tax rate and tax system, would just lock it in forever, requiring a 3/5 vote in order to actually raise taxes, not to mention just a failure to look at a fundamental new direction for our tax code. No, they're maintaining the status quo because that's what the Koch brothers want. They love all of those they love all of those loopholes, tax credits, exemptions that are built into the tax code just to benefit them and a couple of their wealthy friends. They have sought to remove the ability of the federal agencies like the EPA and the FDA from being able to regulate and make sure that we have safe products, we have safe air and water, food, drugs. They have fought and passed legislation to remove those regulations and to hamper the ability of these federal agencies to produce other regulations as the need arises. Short-sighted. It was all to benefit the Koch brothers and their friends. The Energy Tax Prevention Act of 2011, prohibiting the EPA from regulating greenhouse gas emissions. The Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2011, a waste of time that prevents the EPA from regulating farm dust, even though the EPA has said that it does not plan to regulate farm dust. The North American-made Energy Security Act, which would purport to force the president to approve this Keystone Pipeline. Keystone Pipeline, by the way, there's a terminal owned by the Koch brothers, one of their corporate subsidiaries, located in at the beginning of this pipeline up in Canada, Alberta, Canada. And then along the route, the proposed route of the pipeline, are other Koch brothers entities, refineries, that will profit as a result of the tar sands, oil sands coming out of Canada through the U.S. all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And then what will happen at the Gulf of Mexico? That oil will be shipped over to China. Not any of it available to Americans for our energy use. It's all going overseas to the highest bidder. And that's a fact. The Consumer Financial Protection, Safety and Soundness Improvement Act of 2011, which would weaken the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was a part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street regulations. They've sought to water that down, and then in the Senate, the Republicans have prevented a head of that agency from being confirmed. They have fought the payroll tax cuts and the extension of unemployment insurance to the long-term unemployed. They have fought that with great vigor. They held those items hostage, by the way, last year at this time, just so that they could get a 2-year extension on the Bush tax cuts, which benefit the top 1%. And I must congratulate the members of the House, the Tea Party Republicans, who have batted 100% in ensuring that not one tax increase for millionaires and billionaires was able to pass through this House. But easily, though, they can walk away from a tax cut for the Middle East. They just did it today. Excuse me, for the middle class. They just did it today. Instead of allowing us to vote on a Senate bill which was approved over there in a bipartisan way, 89 of 100 senators voted yes, 10 voted no. That's almost a 90% bipartisan bill that the Senate passed. Now, it's not the best bill. 2 months of extension of unemployment insurance, 2 month extension of the payroll tax cut for the middle class, 2-month extension of the what's called the doc fix, but the doctors at the end of the year who treat Medicare patients are scheduled to receive a 27% reduction in the amount of their reimbursements paid by the government. And the Republicans here in the House refused to allow us to vote on that Senate bipartisan bill, which, as they say, kicks the can down the road, but it does extend the opportunity to reach a longer-term agreement by 60 days. But instead, what we have is the Republicans here in Congress, the Tea Party Republicans, refusing to let us vote on the Senate proposal. And then they, instead of announcing that we're leaving town now, they don't intend to come back. They're gone. If you go to the airport right now, you'll see them lined up, many of them with hats on, trying to shield themselves from the glare of public attention, making their way back home. You'll find them at the airport right now. And they don't want to come back. We could have had this done, ladies and gentlemen. We could have all left today, this chamber, with our heads held high, knowing that the middle class, knowing that it won't be a tax increase as of January 1 for 160 million Americans. We would have known that those 2.2 million long-term unemployed individuals would have their benefits extended. We would have known that the 47 million seniors on Medicare here in the United States would have the ability to access the same doctor that they have utilized, because that doc fix didn't go into effect, the 27% decrease. That's going to cause doctors to be unable financially to treat those patients. So it raises the possibility that people will have to be reassigned to another doctor, and then because so many doctors will opt out of treating Medicare, then that means that the doctors who do treat them have a larger clientele, patient base, and can't be as effective as if they could just simply practice medicine in a way that was not volume oriented. So these are not things that I feel good about in terms of being able to leave today, but my Republican friends got up and inferred, I actually told you that the reason why they were leaving is because it's not a 12-month extension of the tax cut. And you know, I know, and the American people know that that's not true. And they argued that with righteous indignation, one after the other. It's like they have gotten to the point where now they believe this stuff themselves. But don't you be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be hoodwinked. Don't be misled. We've got elections coming up in 2012. The mantra of the opposition to President Obama has been, we're going to do everything we can to make him a one-term president. They announced that on the day of his inauguration. They have stuck to it. And they are concerned because despite all of that obstructionism, the economy has started to get a little better. They're concerned about that. And so they want to impose as much harm and pain on middle-class people as they can, to try to keep them confused about what is actually happening in their lives. Is it the Koch brothers and unbridled, laissez-faire, free market activity that's harming them? Or is it government? Well, to the extent that government is in bed with folks like the Koch brothers, yeah, government is the problem. But there's some good people out here. Not everybody is involved with the Koch brothers. It's bought and sold off to the Koch brothers. Not everybody. Not everybody has been influenced under the Lewis Powell manifesto that has been put into operation and has resulted in where we are today with people in the streets demanding equity. This is a serious situation that we're in, ladies and gentlemen. It's for the heart and soul of our country. And there are many good people out here in Congress who want to do the right thing by way of the people. But then you've got a group of extremists in here calling themselves Tea Partiers who are controlling the flow of everything. And it's not to your benefit. Now, I don't normally come up and participate in these 1-hour dissertations. This is the first one I've done ever by myself. But I thought I would do so today because it's on my heart to make sure that we set the record straight before the end of this year, and that you at least have a voice that's crying a different tune than the righteous indignation of those who I have to again congratulate this year, the Tea Party Republicans. They batted 100%. Not one penny of taxes for their Koch brothers friends, millionaires and billionaires. But yet they leave and cost each middle-class taxpayer on average about $1,000. Which will go into effect on January 1, because they would not let this body vote on the Senate bipartisan compromise bill. They don't like compromise. They don't want bipartisanship. It's our way or you take the highway. And that's the way that it's been this past year. All of the manufactured crises, the debt ceiling, will we be able to keep the government operating, government shutdowns. We've had about 3 of those this year. And then they leave out of here saying that a 2-month extension of tax cuts for the middle class won't do anything. It can't be done. I heard the fourth highest ranking Republican in this body lamented that a 2-month extension of the unemployment insurance for the long-term uninsured would burden the payroll software companies. They're more worried about the burden of an accounting fix that can be done with a couple of on the computer. They're worried about that burden on the corporations that prepare the payroll checks and information like that. They provide payment for their corporate customers. He's worried about them, but he's not worried about the very people who will lose, who'll end up paying $1,000 more. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He doesn't care about those who struggling to stay in the middle class, depending on their unemployment insurance, which will get cut off, whacked off, come January 1. Somebody else today on the Tea Party side said that this is a game of poker that we're playing right now. How ridiculous. Are any of you out there playing poker? Do you have anything to play poker with? You're trying to buy Christmas gifts out here. They say that this payroll tax cut and the unemployment insurance and the doc fix can't be implemented within 2 months. But those things we're just maintaining the status quo. There's nothing to implement. Why can't we let it go for another 2 months and give ourselves another opportunity to negotiate a fair and balanced, bipartisan piece of legislation that the president can sign, like what they did in the Senate? Why can't we do that? Well, I submit to you that they're not really interested in the middle class. That's clear. Because if they were, they would not have left today. Some of them unwittingly are pawns in this master plan that was set out in the Lewis Powell memo, and I'd advise you to go to the internet and look it up. L-E-W-I-S, Lewis Powell. And you will read that, and you will see how effective his plan has been carried out and how close we are to the hopes and dreams of middle-class Americans being strangled due to their public policy being controlled by those corporations. Not for the benefit of the people, but for the benefit of the rich, powerful, and the corporations, which our U.S. Supreme Court now says are people. In the Citizens United decision, I watched one of the justices shaking his head during the president's State of the Union address, where he directed comments about the Citizens United decision. I watched that justice shaking his head no. I wonder if he would shake his head no today, as the president pointed out exactly what would happen as a result of that corporate influence gaining unfettered access to our public policy making apparatus, our democracy. So We're under attack, middle-class people. It's time for us to stand up, to get educated about what's going on out here, and the fact that there's no need to be angry with your neighbor because they are African American, or neighbor over there is gay, or this one over here, I don't know if they are a illegal alien or not, so I don't, we got to do away with them. Just an abortion is, you know, we end up dividing ourselves based on the public relations game plan that is put forward to influence us. And we fall for it. And so then we get divided and blaming ourselves instead of directing our attention to those who continue to drive their Brinks trucks hour after hour into the bank. So it's time for us to wake up, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for us to get smart. It's time for us to put aside our dislikes based on how somebody looks. And it's time for us to unite and take this country back. I want to thank y'all for listening to me today. I feel better after closing the year with setting things in a proper format. And I look forward to us being able to come back next year and do some things that will benefit regular working people in this country and try to shift the imbalance of wealth back into one where all people are able to prosper in this country. Thank you very much. And